Welcome back to Prime Live. You are still watching INX Prime on channel 345. And my next guest is actually a very interesting conversation that I'm about to have. Her name is Ncazelo Mlilo, who is an executive director at Paula. Now, we will be speaking to her about the fact that recently she was honored at the Women Changing the World Awards in London. And Ncazelo took home two major global accolades: the People's Choice Award for Social Enterprises and Nonprofits, and the Women in Mental Health and Counseling Services Award. Now, I want to learn about her journey, how she got here, and how does she feel to bring back home these two accolades. Thank you so much for joining us on Prime Live.
Thank you for having me. It's fantastic to be here.
It's a pleasure. Now, first of all, congratulations on your global recognition. What does winning these Women Changing the World Awards mean to you, especially that you have received it on a global platform?
I must say I'm very excited about it. I'm humbled too, and I feel really honored to have been recognized in such a way. And I'm appreciative of the fact that the work that I've been doing over the last few decades is being recognized. And so it's fantastic to bring it back home. I think for me, it speaks a lot to how Africa, is beyond me. It's Africa taking a lead in mental health issues, which is very interesting because often, people will say it feels like when it comes to therapy, counseling, it's not an African thing. But here we are being recognized at a global, scale, that we are leading in doing the work that we do. And I suppose it's really quite lovely to have that feeling and to have, managed to, make such an impact. Yeah.
That sounds beautiful. Now, you've always emphasized the importance of Afrocentric, culturally sensitive therapy. Can you explain why culture plays such a pivotal role in mental interventions? Because you highlighted Africa and the fact that being recognized as someone that's big on mental health advocacy, or advocate. So tell us about the importance of that.
Um, it's extremely important because um, how do you help people to heal if you don't understand who they are? And I think, our culture is about understanding who we are, um, our ways of being. And, my efforts have always been to try and make therapy culturally resonant and so that people, experience what we are offering as meaningful, as relatable. And so all that cannot really be possible without cultural competence, to a certain extent. And so I am very proud that all the work that I've done, all the methodologies that I've produced have actually been through the learning with communities that I work with, being inspired by them and what they bring forward, and then using, that to kind of create methodologies. And so the Tree of Life flagship methodology, which I think is the one that is behind these awards, is now in 60 countries around the world. And it was inspired by children affected by AIDS, working with the young people and hearing about their dilemmas, their challenges, often related to their beliefs, their culture, their traditions, things that were very difficult for them. And then trying to say, if this is what is important to children, how do we then create a way of working with them, of responding to their predicaments that really speaks to these particular challenges that they have experienced. And so that is what I've always done. I've always drawn inspiration from the people that I work with, from the communities, and used that to kind of create different methodologies. And yeah.
Before you actually spoke about the Tree of Life, I was about to ask you that, and you've already answered that. It's a very beautiful methodology, I must say.
Yeah.
And in your own words, why is it important for people to tell their stories, and how they tell them, and tell us about the importance of people's stories, how they tell them, and how that affects their healing process.
Yeah. So often, I think if you look at Western therapies, the idea is to listen to your therapist to tell you what is wrong with you. They give you the diagnosis.
Yes.
Their voice is privileged. It's the one that's at the center. Now, the approach that I use, which is based on what we call narrative therapy, does the opposite. It actually centers people as the experts of their own lives and invites therapists to be decentered but influential. And what that means is that we basically want to be privileging and honoring people's stories and give them an opportunity to tell us what is really going on, for them. Um, and, um, and so the kind of stories that people share in the kind of work that I do is I know that people have trauma stories, they have problem stories, but Western-centric ideas also tend to focus too much on trauma. They focus a lot on the problem story.
Yeah.
And sometimes that in itself can be very limiting because then people struggle to see themselves outside the problems of their lives. They start to live their lives according to to their challenges and their dilemmas. So the Tree of Life, for example, seeks to help people to explore other stories. Yes, you've got trauma stories, but you've also got other stories that might contradict your trauma stories. And healing comes from those types of stories. Stories that talk to your skills, your hopes, your dreams, things that are important to you, your passions in life, and things that are often eroded, because of trauma. And so my work is often described as being very strength-based because, yes, we acknowledge traumas, we acknowledge hardships, but we want to move beyond that. We want to help people to reconnect with aspects of their lives that are often lost as a result of trauma. And so looking at the Tree of Life methodology, it just helps people to flourish because they then discover other things about their lives, things they've not thought about, things about their histories, their cultures, things that give them a sense of hope and a sense of personhood, a renewed sense of who I am. And so, there's just a lot of effort towards creating hope for people and helping people to move beyond their predicaments.
I like this conversation so much because just the other day I was having a conversation with someone on the fact that yes, we are a self-aware generation and everybody now knows their traumas and they are diagnosing themselves. I have this and I have that, but it's almost like we have become a generation that focuses so much on the problem itself. Everything is a trauma response. I'm responding like this because I have trauma in 1, 2, and 3, and we end up forgetting the other stories that make us who we are, the stories that give us hope, the stories that validate our beingness and just being wholesome. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. But we do know that Paula also trains over 1,000 mental health professionals a year and reaches over 100,000 plus individual, and that's incredible. Congratulations on that again. How do you always make sure that you are staying on top of your game and you are impacting as many lives as possible?
Um, I really think the work has spoken for itself, um, particularly talking about the footprint, of Tree of Life and how it's used in countries like the UK, in Australia, in Canada, just various countries, worldwide. And so there are now communities of mental health practitioners, clinical psychologists, social workers who use these ideas because they feel that they've got so much more to offer than sort of your Western medical models that are very trauma focused. And so we also have quite a huge population of Africans living elsewhere around the world. And they'll often talk about how, when they use Tree of Life or Courage and the other interventions that have developed, people come alive and, suddenly therapy makes sense to them. And so I think that in itself has created a lot of demand for people to, to want training, for their staff, for their teams. And so I do train over 1,000 mental health practitioners yearly, and I provide a lot of supervision, for the people who are using the ideas to stay on track and so on. And so I think that is what, keeps me on top of the game. And I love that the work that we do with Paula in South Africa continues to feed into the training that we offer. Because I've always wanted to be a practitioner who's not theoretical. I want to be grounded in community and in practice. And so, being able to meet people, you continue to learn, you continue to grow, and you're able to take those lessons into training spaces and so on. So yeah, that's what we do.
From even you explaining it, I can tell the passion that's coming out of that, passion for community and just helping people in general. Now, can you share? I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot. Is there a story or moment where you saw your methodologies spark real change in a person or a community?
Yeah, I think stories. There are many, many, many stories. Thinking about my recent, I think a story that really touched me was in a current supervision that I did with one of, the clinical social workers that I provide supervision to, who's based in Canada, and how she spoke about using Tree of Life in her one-on-one consultations with someone who had opted to end their life and to get assistance to end their life because they were in a very highly depressive state, feeling very hopeless. And, this person experiences Tree of Life. And she changed her mind and she said, I'm not going to end my life again. We work a lot with children in schools, in our townships, because that's where we offer our services in the most under-resourced, marginalized, disadvantaged communities. And so, it's such a good experience to see children presenting with very high scores of depression. But after we've offered, the Tree of Life and the other interventions, recording 0 symptoms. And so it's just so fantastic, just to see whether it's men or it's women, it's families in crisis. So there are many, many stories of how Tree of Life has contributed to reducing suicidal ideations, suicidal attempts, amongst children and young people, children struggling with experiences of loss. I'm thinking of a letter that I read recently where a child was saying, I had lost hope, my mother died, my granny died, and, nothing made sense to me anymore. I'd also given up living until I did Tree of Life. And now I'm feeling happier and more hopeful. And I have a sense that it will be okay and I will be okay. Those are the stories that keep us going. They feed our souls and they make it possible for us to continue to do the work that we do.
It's in the name itself, the Tree of Life, and I'm loving that you are having such impact on communities and people in general, and passionately so, not just as just work or I have to do this. So it's very, very grounding to see that there are still people who are invested in other people and just making sure that you serve your community. I think that's the inspiration and the motivation that we needed for today. But unfortunately, we have run out of time, and I really, really wished we could, speak more on Paula and what you do and the impact that you're having on communities. So hopefully some other time we can have you back so that you can just dissect and tell us more about the great work that you're doing. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Lovely to be here.
It was definitely a lovely conversation. Viewers at home, that was a very informative conversation that I just had, and I don't know if it left you inspired, but I am definitely inspired. Let us know on all our social media platforms how you feel about this, but more than anything, go on and show some love to Paula and find them on social media, or so that you can be part of their community and interact with them. But hopefully this has left you feeling inspired. But without wasting any time, we will go to a quick ad break. We still have more for you, so stay tuned.